Weather was not too bad. Had a little bit of rain. Wasn't too cold. My house is nice and warm. A new wood stove is great. Tell ya, burns half the wood, puts out half again as much heat. Marvels of modern technology. I mean, what can you do with a wood stove, right? You put wood in, you light it, and it burns. No. Our wood stove has what's called a catalytic combustor in it. You know, you have one of those on your car, catalytic converter that recycles the exhaust gases of your back through to reduce emissions, and wood stove does the same thing. Well, I'm getting more mileage out of that wood stove. Yes, indeed. Let's bow our heads. Father, we thank you for the Sabbath and for the opportunity it gives us to remember your blessings of the past week, to rest and refresh ourselves, to fellowship, study, and worship. Bless us this day, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, and the title of our lesson this week is A Patriot's Vision. And we finally get to the second half of this book. By the way, anyone have a Bible that has the Apocrypha in it? I know this is heretical for Seventh-day Adventists, but one at home.
That's in Spanish.
That's all right. Anyone ever read the Apocrypha? If you have the opportunity, sometime this quarter, go and find a Bible or a copy of the Apocrypha, or a Bible that has the Apocrypha in it, and read the books of Esdras. Okay. Stop at the college library, our friendly neighborhood librarian says. Why not? The books of Esdras. Anyone tell me why we would be interested in the books of Esdras?
I was wondering that. Not in from it, and it's not in the canon, it's not included because I thought that it was not authentic information.
Is that right?
That's my opinion.
That's why Ellen White quoted it.
Actually, Ellen White quoted rather extensively from the Apocrypha on occasion, but why would we be interested this quarter in the books of Esdras? Now, come on. What? In fact, the book Ezra Nehemiah was and still is a part of the set of books that are called Esdras in a slightly different form.
And where Esdras is all messed up chronologically, Esdras is not. Therefore, if we read Esdras, we can get a clearer and better understanding and picture of what it is all about.
See, Ezra Nehemiah, especially the book of Ezra, the one that got split off as the first half, the chronology in this book, as you know by now, is sort of tough. It's all mixed up. But the version in Esdras, which is another manuscript that of the same family that our present book of Ezra was copied from, isn't all messed up like this. So you get a little bit better picture of the flow of events and the people involved and how they related to each other. So, hey, you learn something new every day, Cephas. You see? Books of Esdras. Good place to go to get a picture of this quarter's studies. Okay, A Patriot's Vision. Read with me, if you would, in the book of Nehemiah, first chapter, the words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah, in the month of Kislev in the 20th year. By the way, right here is one of the biggest problems that we have in studying the Bible, particularly books like Ezra and Nehemiah. Nehemiah, or this book that's called Nehemiah, begins in the month of Kislev in the 20th year. Now, you see, if somebody says July 13 to you today, 1993. You have no trouble identifying the date that they're talking about. None at all, right? Whether you're in the United States, the Soviet Union, Iran, or Nigeria, everybody uses the very same calendar. They may also use other calendars, but everybody uses the same calendar. Okay? Come forward, Dr. Wood. Come forward, sir. All the way forward. But such was not the case in the time that we're discussing here in the quarter. For example, in the time period that we're discussing, the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, we have to concern ourselves with at least 4 separate calendars, possibly 5. You see, everybody had their own calendar. Now, it may seem a small thing to you, but AD and BC, you know, after and before Christ, when was that dating system devised? Yeah, certainly after the birth of Christ. In the late Roman period. In fact, when was our calendar, the calendar we use today, finally settled on? When did it become our calendar? Now, this was a trick question, of course, because we remember Julius Caesar. Oh, was Julie the Pope? Was Pope Julie? I thought I could trick some of you. Who finally settled on the calendar? What is the calendar we use today called, by the way? Gregorian calendar. Why is it called the Gregorian calendar? Pope Gregory. But when did that calendar become our calendar? The calendar of the United States. Well, let me ask you this. When was Abraham Lincoln born? What's his birthday? No, not Abraham Lincoln. George Washington. Remember, we have this problem with George Washington's birthday? It was after George Washington was born that the calendar that we use today was finally adopted by. So our calendar isn't all that old. But fancy, if you can, a world in which the Soviet Union, Great Britain, France, the United States, and Nigeria all have calendars of their own, each with a different new year, each with different length months. Why, if Faith Beale were here today, she could tell us that this is not the year 1993. Not on the Jewish calendar. And if Dr. Gozen were here, he could tell us the same. Not on the Arab calendar. Both of those calendars are still in use today. And so it's hard sometimes, even today, to date events across calendars, only because we don't understand that calendar. You see, mathematically, you can always match those calendars up because we know when they began to be used. Now, but here when we read Nehemiah 1:1, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, we have a more than small problem. Because in order to place this date, we have to be able to synchronize the Babylonian, Persian, Egyptian, and Jewish calendars. Might seem a small thing, but which year was the 20th year, anyway?
20th year of his reign.
By whose calendar? You see, different calendar systems counted the years of a king's reign differently. For example, we use the United States as an example. When was Bill Clinton elected president? November of 92. He became king in January of some would say she became king. No. 1993, okay, but after the new year, right? Now, the way we count things, the first year of his presidency is 1993, right?
But his succession was in 1992. The president would no longer move any troops without his approval.
But he became, for all intents and purposes, president in November of 1992. Now, here's the way it worked in different ancient calendars. Some said his first year was 1992. That's when he was elected king. And in 1993, it would be his second year. Year 1, year 2, right? So today's date, for example, would be the 13th day of the 11th month of the second year in that calendar, right? Others did it differently. They used that year when he was elected king and called it his ascension year, when he became king. And until the next new year came, they would continue to date things in his ascension year. After the 1st of January would begin his first year. So in that calendar system, today would be 13th day of the 11th month of the first year. So which date was Nehemiah using when it gets worse? I know, but
You could date the years from the day he exceeded, right? And this would be the 12th month.
yes,
What
that was the other system.
Wait a minute, what was the election day? Election day is what, November?
What
8th?
was it last year? I think so, yeah.
Is it November 8th?
Was it, no, it would have been the 9th last year. This year, it would have been the 8th last year, yeah.
So this is really the third day of the second year.
Yes. That's another way to do it. On the anniversary of his election, you mark the years. Another form of calendar keeping in the ancient world. So that today would be the fourth or fifth day of the second year.
Did they also play the game like the British queen became queen when her father died, but she was coronated?
Crowned sometime later. All sorts of systems have been used to establish a calendar, a way by which people could keep track of when things happened. And everybody used their own system. Well, almost everybody. A lot of people especially in the later and more sophisticated empiric periods, learned to borrow from each other. The Romans were the greatest borrowers in history. They borrowed the best of everyone's culture and passed that habit on along to the United States. After a long historic hiatus, that practice came back into popularity. What I want you to realize is that right here in the first verse of Nehemiah, we happen across our first problem in studying this book of the Bible. Which calendar is Nehemiah using or is being used to describe these activities of Nehemiah? It does make a difference, you know. For example, the Babylonian year began in what season of the year? Spring, right? Ours begins in the middle of the winter. The Jewish year began in the fall. So, now, which year are we talking about? Are we talking about a year that began in the middle of the winter, that began in the spring, or began in the fall? Whose year are we using here to describe these events?
Most likely the Babylonian.
Why most likely the Babylonian?
Because he was dealing with the Babylonian situation.
Well, they were living in Mesopotamia, but it was the period of the Persian Empire.
And a Jew was writing them.
And it was being written by a Jewish scribe. Is Kislev a Jewish month?
Well, it is now, so is Nissan. That's not an answer to the question.
Where did the months of the Jewish year, today's Jewish year, come from? There we go. Why?
They were the rulers during that time.
That's where they lived. That's where the ruling classes of the Jewish nation, which eventually descended to our day, organized themselves, right? So the Jews used a but that's not quite right either. See, I did read that book twice. They used a Jewish version of the Babylonian year. See, the Jews began their year in the month Tishri. The Babylonians began their year in the month Nisan, not the car. The Egyptians began their new year in the month Thoth. And each of them was at a different point in the solar year. So when a Jew writing with a Babylonian background describes the activities that took place in a part of the world that was heavily influenced by both Mesopotamian and Egyptian history, whose year was he using to describe what happened? And why is it important? Because there are some dates that fix our theology. And the date on which those events took place is important. Did Ezra come to Palestine in a given year or not? And then there's just the general confusion of, hey, when was this anyway? Which came first, Ezra or Nehemiah? And how can you tell? How does the calendar that is used in these books give you clues to that? There's more to it than just reading Nehemiah and saying, In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. 20th year of what?
Xerxes' reign.
The king, right? 20th year of King, you got to know which king, or you don't know when this happened. And then the 20th year. See, was this an accession calendar? Or another kind of calendar? So was this really his 19th year, his 20th year, or his 21st year, the way we would count it? I don't know. You didn't even know that was a problem until now, did you? Huh?
Who did you just say didn't?
There was a lovely lady back there who was laughing along with me.
I think she should know. Some here should know.
John, I'm going to give this back to you, having disturbed everyone's equanimity this morning. I didn't prepare to teach this lesson. Now, I did study it, Professor Wood, and you have until 10:40.
10:40?
10:40. There's no Sabbath school program this morning.
Oh, boy.
That snapped his head up, didn't it?
So the issue now, I want to repeat what he said because I think it needs to be fixed in memory. What were the various ways that they counted the beginning of a reign? When would you say you were in the second year of something? After you'd been doing it for how long?
1 year.
For 1 year. You and I, we've been talking about this. We study these things in the afternoon in a class. We're in the 4th year of that class. What do I mean by that? We started in November, and at the beginning of the month, 3 years ago, we're starting the 4th year. I'm counting that by full years, right? I'm making the assumption that my second year isn't until a full year has passed. Now, what do I mean by a year? What's a year? 12 months. Oh, I heard you say 12 months all over the place. Who said a year was 12 months?
You said, what would we say?
Oh, that's true, I did. Got me there. Yes, I did. There's no exegesis in that, is there? Okay, I did. What? You've been gone 45 seconds and I'm in trouble already. The word month. What is that word?
We can start with that
What? No. What is that word, month?
one. Phase of the moon.
Moonth. It mooneth. It mooneth. That's what it's just a shortening of the verb. It mooneth. When it mooneth, what doth it do? What?
To show a sliver.
Sliver of the new moon shows. Where?
Where?
Yes, where? You're doing good. What?
Where you happen to be looking
Where you happen to be looking at it, you say.
Right.
We're doing exegesis of Ezra and Nehemiah.
Oh, okay.
Where am I looking at it?
In Palestine, well, Babylon.
Up.
Persia.
Yes. His answer was, where are you looking at it? In Palestine, but he couldn't finish the word Palestine before he said Babylon, but then he quickly corrected to Persia. What's the issue? The year begins when the new moon is seen. Where?
Where you are.
This could cause the slippage of the month by a day or two. Are you clear? Now, how long is the month anyway? 28 days. What? Well, now, wait a minute. The lunar month is the month. The month is when it mooneth.
Well, our months are a little bit stretched out.
Our months are stretched out? Oh, dear. What does that mean?
Gonna have a blue moon.
Hmm? Oh, come on now. I know that it says in Daniel 7 that the little horn would do wickedly for how long? Time, and half a time. And what is that?
Time is a year.
Well, I'm not even going to get into that. A time is a year, you said. You should know better than that. A time is a what? A time is a what? A time, which means what? A time cycle, which could be what? A day, a week. Did the Babylonians have weeks of 7 days? What was the day on which the Babylonians would not conduct business? Did they have a week?
I'm sure they probably did.
That was a good guess. Yes, they did. Yeah, they had. What day would they not conduct business in that week?
I would guess Sunday, but I don't know.
Friday, Sunday. Anybody want to vote for Tuesday?
That's my opinion because
Friday because of later Muslim practice? Friday came out of an event in Muhammad's life. It was not Friday. The Babylonians did not give preference to the sun. Marduk was not a sun god. What have I just said? The day on which they would not conduct business was not Friday. It was not Sunday. What? What? Oh, no, it wasn't Tuesday. That was a trick.
Then it was Saturday.
It was Saturday. The Babylonian Sabbath was Saturday. The Babylonians attacked Jerusalem on Saturday because they knew that they didn't mind fighting on Saturday. That wasn't one of their rules, but for the Hebrews, I was so sly. For the Hebrews, it was a rule. That's why when we compare our data in Ezekiel to the Babylonian Chronicle, we know that the Old Testament Sabbath was our Saturday, despite all the changes in the calendar. Now then, so there was, but the month here is what?
29 or 30 days.
20.
29 fraction cycle.
Now, look, I'm a mortgage banker. I have to figure interest, prepaid interest on closed mortgages, and I know for sure how many days the month has.
30.
What? 30? Where did I get that idea?
From the banker's handbook.
From the banker's handbook. And where did the banker's handbook come from? It came from Babylon. The Babylonians recognized the problem and invented an artificial month arbitrarily. And they said, bankers and businessmen, there's something you need to know to get order here, and that is that every month has 30 days. And I've been listening to them ever since. There was a theoretical month. Oh, we saved it here. There was a theoretical month of 30 days. There was an actual month of what? 28 days. Now, what's the problem? Your lunar years are going to do what? They're going to be shorter than your... If you take 12 of your months, you're going to end up with what?
Christmas in the summertime.
Eventually, your calendar is going to wander. Your New Year is going to wander. Your years are going to be utterly out of sync with your agrarian cycle. There was such a calendar. Yes? The Egyptians had this problem. The Egyptian calendar in the century we're studying had wandered backward several months. Okay. During this period, Egypt kept revolting and revolting and revolting from the Persian Empire. Yes, I know. The Persians found that revolting. Now, the problem was that the Persian army kept making its way through Palestine to Egypt to fight. And an army brings with it what?
The calendar.
A calendar, among other things, diseases, all sorts of things, but it brings a calendar with it. The Persians kept going back and forth through Palestine in this period, right? But every time Egypt revolted, it immediately sent its army and its governors and therefore its calendar into Palestine, because it's easier to block the Persian army at the north end of Palestine and at the south end, which happens to be Egypt. You see the problem? It is not by chance that if we have this even close to correct, both Ezra and Nehemiah came to Palestine just after an Egyptian revolt. What was the purpose of the magnanimity of the Persian emperors?
Shut up the Egyptian.
Yeah, that's right. They needed a buffer state, and they sent, in both cases, Persian officials of their own government, who happened to be what? Jews, to govern Judea and form a buffer state. In both cases. In fact, it was a revolt of Egypt that had stimulated Zerubbabel coming in 520. So, Zerubbabel, Ezra, Nehemiah all arrive in the wake of a failed Egyptian revolution. Yes. Okay. Now then, the Egyptians followed those lunar months faithfully, even though that was doing what? That was giving them a short year, which was what? Was receding through the year, backwards. Okay? How did the Babylonians solve the problem of the non-sequence of the lunar and solar calendar? No, the 30-day month was a theoretical month to solve this problem in behalf of business.
They added an extra month every 2 or 3 years. That made sense.
When they needed it, they added a leap month. They let it get almost a month out of phase and then inserted a 13th month, and then, of course, your new year jumps forward of where it used to be and recedes backwards. All right? Okay. We know that the Jews in the 5th century, 6th and 5th century, were doing the same thing. Sometimes the Babylonians inserted a second month. It has been argued that they would not have inserted a second month in the Jewish calendar because that would get the spring festivals and the fall festivals out of phase as we find them in the book of the law. And we know Ezra brought back the book of the law, right? And they read the law. So as we read Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, it will give us some idea of what at least Ezra and his crowd thought is the way it should be done, right? Okay, now then. So we have the wandering Egyptian calendar and the leap month calendar of the Babylonian Jews. And then what were the Persians doing? What were the Persians doing? Yes, yes. What were the Persians doing? Yes. Cyrus, remember, was king of Anshan, the southern Persians. Remember, he was the grandson of a Median king? And who were the allies of the Medes first? Don't be silly here. Who were the allies of the Medes first? When the great evil empire, the Assyrian Empire, was destroyed, who was the Assyrian Empire destroyed by? What? The Babylonians and Medes. The Medo-Babylonian coalition destroyed the ancient Assyrian Empire. The Babylonians and Medes were allies and had been allies for a long, long time. Even the last two kings of Babylon. Who were they again? A week has passed. Who were the last two kings of Babylon? Belshazzar and his father, Nabonidus. Even they were formally allied to the Medes. The Chaldean family was a Persian family. Listen to what I'm saying. The Chaldean family. Who were the Chaldeans? They were the family that created the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Nabopolassar, Nebuchadnezzar were what? Were Chaldean kings of a Persian family. By no mistake, the Persians were using, with some adjustment, what? With some adjustment, the Persians were using the Babylonian calendar. Yes. Okay. Now, where is Nehemiah? Well, what is Susa? Where?
Iran.
In Iran? Is it still in Iran? Now, are you going to say I've been there?
In here, but not.
It's still where it used to be. It hasn't gone away. It's still there.
That's not the capital of Iran now.
No, it's not the capital now. No. Of course, there was a modern Iranian king who wanted to revive the Persian Empire and rule over the whole Middle East. Who was that? Muhammad Reza, the what? Shah? The emperor. Shah and Shah, the emperor of emperors, in fact. How did he propose to revive the Persian Empire? On the 2500th anniversary of Cyrus's accession, he had a great celebration that nearly bankrupted his country. His troubles began at that moment, to celebrate the rise of Cyrus and the Persian Empire. And he intended that to be what? The beginning of the new Persian Empire. So he had this big celebration decked out, and the tents were put on the site. They moved. Oh, we had quite a shindig at Persepolis and also at Susa. These Persian capitals. Yeah. Okay. Now it happened in the month of Kislev in the 20th year as I was in Susa, the capital. Okay. So, the slightly different Babylonian and Jewish calendars are possibilities here. And what do we want to find out about the 20th year? Yes. We need to know the 20th year of what king, and as soon as we find that out, we have to find out something else that we've already talked about, which is what? Yes, and in order to count his 20th year, the accession or non-accession year method. Can we say it again, what it is? If Bill Clinton had become the nominal president last November, the space between November and the end of December would have been counted in the accession year method as what? His first year. And on January 1, what would have begun? His second year. Now, what did we say? To us, the second year doesn't begin until what? Until what? A full anniversary until you've... I don't want to say 12 months yet. That's what got us into trouble before. Okay, yes. Until a full calendar year has passed. Yes.
Are you saying then that two people are in charge at the same time?
Yes, exactly. Under the accession year method, the year 1983 would have been counted what? As the fourth year of Bush, and also what? The first year of Clinton at the same time. Now, what's interesting then is that a scribe writing under Bush's reign, and what was the day of the election? November 3. He's saying November 8. Don't. November 3rd. Okay. All right. A scribe writing on November 2 could write in the fourth year of George Bush. And a scribe writing on November 4 could write on the first year of Bill Clinton. Now, they could also date that to the year that we're using. They could have said, in the 11th month of the fourth year of George Bush on the second day of the month, and also said in the 11th month, on the first year of the reign of Bill Clinton on the fourth day of the month. It could get worse, Pete. A scribe might write in the 11th month, in the fourth year of George Bush, on the fourth day of the month. Why would a scribe do that? No. Wait a minute, we're in the ancient world. The scribe doesn't know what?
That the other guys knew?
Doesn't know that Bush is out and Clinton is in. Well, he's in the American Empire. Why doesn't he know? He'll get the news when? Real soon. And as soon as he hears it, what will he do? He'll begin dating his documents by what? The first year of Bill Clinton. But he's only going to do that when what? When he finds out, therefore, in different parts of the empire, on the same day, the document might be dated what? Differently. Okay. Does it make a difference? You were in class last week. Do we need to establish 457 BC, the Day of Atonement, as the beginning of the 2300 days? Yes. There's no Adventism without it. The whole thing is a hoax without it. That's how important it is. No Day of Atonement in the fall of 1844 AD, no Seventh-day Adventism. Period. That's simple. Okay. All right. Now then. What? Now, you weren't here last week, but what did I say in class? I said this, that Seventh-day Adventism, Mrs. White, tied herself to the investigative judgment beginning on the 10th day of the 7th month in the fall of 1844. She tied herself to a particular day. Now we're in big trouble. Why? What's the likelihood, I asked, that some 18th century chronologist, because the Millerites were really 18th century folks, that some 18th century chronologist would have gotten this ancient chronology right to the day? What do we find out usually?
Like hardly any chance at all.
Yes. It'd be so slight that you could come out to the right day. That's the issue. Okay. Now, we need to find out what about this king. When we say in the 20th year, what do we need to find out? Are they practicing the accession year or non-accession year method? Why? Why is that significant?
It's time.
How much of a difference will it show up in the date? When we go back by our calendar and use BC dates and tie them to astronomical events, how far off will we be based on accession or non-accession year? If the accession came in the right part of our year, we could be off by 1 full year. Now, since we read on and we find out that the king is Artaxerxes, we have a very, very easy job. Oh, good. We know for sure now. It was Artaxerxes, relief, except that what?
I don't know which method of calculating.
What? Oh. Well, there were two of any significance. It's not the later Artaxerxes who's facing the Greek Empire and Persia is about to collapse. It's long after that event. There are two Artaxerxes that it may be. We call them Artaxerxes I and Artaxerxes II. I wish that Elizabeth back there in the 16th century had always written herself as Elizabeth I. If she'd had the good sense to call herself Elizabeth I, and everybody in her reign had called herself Elizabeth I, then what? Then I wouldn't have a problem. If everybody in his reign had called Artaxerxes I, Artaxerxes I, then what?
Wouldn't be any confusion.
Except that what? What? What?
You didn't know there was going to be a second.
Well,
Yeah, but they didn't care either.
that's true.
Patronymics again.
Yeah, that's true, because patronymics meaning that the grandson's going to assume the father's name, title, dignity, and divine being or genius. It's the same person, is it not?
So it isn't the second, it is the
It is true that the current queen calls herself Elizabeth II and lately Elizabeth the Last, and has a clear idea that she's not in any way Elizabeth I. But in the ancient mind, what? The two would have been identified as one. Oh boy. Okay, now we have to find out if it's Artaxerxes I or Artaxerxes II. Now this is an unfortunate thing. There's not enough said about the king and the events to tell us. Now, one more thing. Once we decide, if there's some way to decide whether it's Artaxerxes I or the second, we have to find out what?
Accession or non-accession?
Accession or non-accession year. Yes. Okay. Now, Or, of course, we could get off by a year simply by finding out that one person is using a spring New Year, the other person's using a fall New Year, and the event described fell when? In the summer. Because if the event described fell in the summer, and you're using a spring New Year, it would be the 20th year already. And if you're using a fall New Year, it might still be the 19th year, depending on whether you're using an accession or non-accession year. Is everybody following this? The issue is whether there's 457 BC as the beginning of 2300 time units in Daniel 8:14. Right? Let's keep that in front of us. And to 2,300 what?
Days.
What?
Days.
Days. What? Time units. What?
Timing.
Evening, mornings with a hyphen. 2,300 temple time units. I like that. TTU. Temple time units.
You didn't mention the problem with the days, did you?
What?
You didn't mention the problem with the days.
Well, we're right at it now. When does the day begin? Sundown?
Where you are.
Where you are. Sundown where you are, yes.
Sunrise or sundown?
Well, now, wait a minute. The Dies Primus in Egypt is what? The sun. Dies Primus in Egypt is always the sun all through the centuries. Therefore, when would the day begin for the Egyptians?
Well, it says in the Bible, evening and the morning were the first day.
He's talking Egyptian.
The Egyptians didn't care what it said in the Bible. Yes, that's the point. That's exactly the point. For the Egyptians, when did the day begin? At the moment of the sunrise, at dawn. When did it begin for the Hebrews? At sunset. Yes? Yes. Everything for the Romans was at the moment of the rebirth of the sun. And so the Romans have New Year's Day when? On the day that they could calibrate that the day was getting longer and that the sun was being reborn. Right? Yeah. Okay. The birthday of the sun was December 25. But the official day of its lengthening was January 1. That's how they could calibrate it. And they did not calibrate it as in Rome. They calibrated it as they found it in Egypt, interestingly. That's how we have December 25 where we have it. Now, for the Romans, everything was the rebirth of the sun. So when does the day begin? No, the rebirth of the sun. The rebirth of the sun happens on the 25th, but the first isn't till a week later. When is the moment of rebirth? You know that the sun has been gone and will soon emerge. Hasn't happened yet, but when do you know that is? It's at midnight, halfway through the dark time. That's when the day begins. So when do we place the beginning of the day? Having inherited the Roman system, we place it where?
1201.
In the middle of the night. Well, it's hardly my middle of the night, but it was the Roman middle of the night, right? They've slipped it by several hours. 12 p.m. isn't the middle of the night in our culture, but anyway, that's how it happened. Now look, what we need to do is determine which Artaxerxes, the first or the second, because if it is the second, then this is 398 BC. All right? This is 398 BC. Well, then the 2300 days haven't run out yet. They'll probably run out in 2000 along with the Jubilees calendar.
We shouldn't be here. Change the thing up.
Yeah, the point is that if this happened all in 398 BC and following, then what happens to our date 457? It disappears completely as an 18th century mistake. What goes out with it? The investigative judgment, the inspiration of Ellen White, and Adventism as a whole. Because there isn't any Adventism without the investigative judgment. You understand that? The investigative judgment, to what doctrines does Ellen White link the investigative judgment? The study of the sanctuary in heaven and the investigative judgment led us to, what? What's the rest of it? The unchanging nature of the law of God, the obligations of the seventh-day Sabbath, and the true nature of the events connected with the second coming of Christ. In other words, Adventist eschatology. It's all lumped together. Take away one and what? Because they're all related to the same concept of atonement. All right. Now then, we need that 457 date. We need it to be Artaxerxes I, therefore, and something happened right here in the 20th century. In 1911, at the first cataract of the Nile, where the ancient Egyptian empire had repeatedly fortified the cataract against the invasion of Central African cultures, the Persians again fortified the area against invasion from Central Africa, from the south. Why were the Persians worried about the first cataract of the Nile? Again, the Persians were trying to firmly clamp Egypt under their control, right? Why were they doing that anyway? The Persian Empire stretched all the way from India. I could never be a weatherman. I'd be telling you what the weather was in Minneapolis. All the way from India to Turkey. Why was the Persian Empire so worried about Egypt? There was something in particular that caused the Persians to worry about Egypt. The Indus Valley and the great mountains in northern India had such a natural barrier that they were not worried about invasion from India. But they were worried about a particular people or a set of peoples, and that's what made them worried about Egypt. What people or peoples were the Persians right from the beginning, from day one, worried about and increasingly worried about as time passed? Huh? Yeah. What? No. They wanted to secure Egypt because they were very worried about the great and increasing influence of the Hellenes. Persian records show that the Persian emperors were worried about the Greeks from the beginning. They were worried about the great advances in Greek culture. And there was a feeling for a century and a half that someday Persia was going to have to do what? Face up to the problem of Greece. The longer they put it off, the worse it got. Now, this was part of the purpose of shoring up Egypt. So the Persian emperors refortified the great fortress on the Elephantine Island at the first cataract of the Nile. Who was there? Who did they hire as mercenaries? Who were their soldiers? Jews. Well, Hebrews. It's Correct. Hebrews had escaped from the Judean kingdom at the time of its collapse under Babylon, and they followed a syncretistic religion. What does syncretistic mean? Yeah, we see that in the Samaritan religion. That's what Nehemiah is upset about. This Jewish colony on Elephantine Island survived for more than a century. A great large colony of... They built a temple to Yahoo, their god. And because they lived there, because they were such a large population, men, women, and children, families, an entire garrison of Judean exiles, mercenaries, in the service of the Persian emperor, they left behind documents written, since it was in Egypt, on papyrus. Yes. And since it was dry, many of those documents survived. Written in Aramaic, the language of the Persian Empire, Imperial Aramaic, late Aramaic. They wrote in Imperial Aramaic for over a century. And in 1911, what happened?
Somebody found it.
They were found. And so beginning in 1911, they began to be deciphered. Here are Judeans writing in the Persian period. And some interesting things happened. They dated their legal documents. Since they were in Egypt, they sometimes cross-reference to what calendar? The Egyptian or Tothic calendar with its Toth, its first month. Yes. And of course, they were working in the service of the Persian Empire, so they sometimes cross-reference to the official Persian calendar, which we have said was a version of the Babylonian. And, interestingly, they have some names of folks in Palestine mentioned. They have the names of the high priest in Jerusalem, who was upset. One of the high priests in Jerusalem was upset about their syncretistic religion and their temple to Yahoo. And there was considerable interchange between them and Jerusalem and their supporters in Samaria. Now, who was in Samaria according to Nehemiah? You've read the book, I presume. That's a big assumption maybe, but it is a blessed one. Well, having read Nehemiah, what do you know about somebody from Samaria? What? Sanballat and Tobiah. Now, Sanballat and Tobiah were pagans. What? What? Tobiah. We know that the Hebrew word tov means good or blessed. Right. Good is Tobiah. Good is whom? Tobiah. Good is who? Yah. What kind of a name is that? What? What kind of a name is Tobiah? Is it a pagan name? It's a Yahwist name. Now, Sanballat had some sons. One of them was named Shelemiah. What does that tell you? His sons were named with good, both of them. Good, righteous. Yahweh is peace. Yahweh is holiness. Yahweh is integrity. What kind of a name is that to give your son if you're a pagan? What's the problem? What? They were of a different denomination. Yes. They were of a different denomination than the Jews. Okay? And the Jews said to these Judean exiles, you folks should not have a temple to Yah down there. You should not ever swear by the names of these other gods. You shouldn't do this, and you shouldn't do that, and you shouldn't do the following things. We Jews are from the exile. We learned our lesson. We're not going to stand for this kind of stuff. This is what caused the disaster in the first place. But who were the supporters of these Judean exiles down there in the Elephantine Island? Well, they were being attacked over religious reasons. The Persians didn't care about this. Who were their supporters? Sanballat and Tobiah, because they represented what kind of a religion? The very kind of religion that Ezra and Nehemiah would not stand for. So when the high priest in Jerusalem was attacking these folks at Elephantine Island, who did they write to and who sided with them? Sanballat, Tobiah, and their children. And they give dates in their letters. And they mention Tobiah and Sanballat and their children, and they give dates. And it's wonderful because there's the names and there's the same argument we see in Nehemiah. And they give dates. And it's wonderful because the dates are cross-referenced to the Egyptian calendar that they were using. And so by that method, we can find out, Ed, whether it is Artaxerxes the first or Artaxerxes the second, and whether they were using an accession or non-accession year to date this king. Now, why are we relieved that the Elephantine papyri... Oh, a lot of the Elephantine papyri turned up in 1943 in the Brooklyn Museum in Brooklyn, New York. Okay? So a whole bunch more that further illustrated our point came up in 1943 and following in Brooklyn. And so sometimes you will see the Elephantine papyri, referred to as Aramaic papyri, in the Berlin Museum, and sometimes Aramaic papyri in the Brooklyn Museum. So if you want to see these papyri, you need travel no further than Brooklyn and take a look at them. Some of them are on display. And what did we discover? What do you think? The Artaxerxes involved, beyond question, was Artaxerxes the first. Okay, now this Artaxerxes the first reigned during 457 BC. We're greatly relieved to hear that. Okay, now then, what year? Now this turns out to be the very same king who sent Ezra then. What year did Ezra come? Go back to the beginning of Ezra. What year does this happen? Where's the beginning of Ezra's memoirs? Oh, did you turn to Ezra 1:1? Did you turn to Ezra 1:1? Oh. Well, you turned to the last part of the original edition of Chronicles, didn't you? Where is the beginning of the Ezra memoirs? Where does Ezra enter the scene? Where is Ezra as a writer represented in the book that we call Ezra? Well, remember, the book that we call Ezra is based on the last, the latest, and the most corrupt text available. The last, the latest, and the most corrupt text available is in our Bibles. Where can we find the original, the pristine, the correctly ordered text that's not in the mess that our biblical book of Ezra is in? First Esdras. And in First Esdras, this verse here is what? This is the beginning of Ezra. Ezra chapter 7. This is where Ezra begins writing. If you read the first 6 chapters of Ezra, you know that he's not mentioned, his time isn't mentioned, he's not writing. It begins that in the reign of Artaxerxes, king of Persia. What Artaxerxes is that, Ed? The first. Ezra, the son of Sariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Hilkiah. That's the Hilkiah who found the book of the law in the reign of Josiah. The son of Shallum, the son of Zadok. That Zadok is what? That is the Zadok whom David made the true and eternal high priest. The son of Ahitub, the son of Amariah, the son of Azariah, the son of Moriah, the son of Zerahiah, the son of Uzi, the son of Buki, the son of Abishua, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest. Why is Ezra's genealogy included in its fullest form at the beginning of his memoirs? Because Ezra isn't just anybody. He's not just anybody. Ezra is about to make the most sweeping reform that's been made since Moses, and it's going to result in a religion that we call what? It's going to result in a religion that we call Judaism. Judaism begins with whom? Ezra. How many Jews were at Mount Sinai? Not a one. How many Jews were there in David's kingdom? Not a one. How many Jews were there in taking part in Josiah's Reformation? Not one. We have 4 religions in the Bible. We have the God of the fathers, the worship of Shaddai, the patriarchal God. We have Yahwism, right? And after Yahwism developing, just as Yahwism developed from the patriarchal worship of Shaddai, after Yahwism there's what? Judaism that develops from Yahwism. And the last of the 4 religions is Christianity, which developed from Judaism. And they are as different one from another as Christianity is from Judaism. That's how different they are. Here we have Ezra coming and the beginning of Judaism. And why could he make such a sweeping reform? He is not just anybody. Who is he? He is the high priest. And when does he come? What? Ezra 7 and verse 7. Ezra 7:7. Everyone? In the 7th year of Artaxerxes. Now, according to the Persian calendar, that year is 458 BC. What would you say, Ed? Well, now, why does it make a difference, accession or non-accession year? Here we are in Sabbath school. We come to study the Bible to get a blessing and study spiritual things, and instead we study the calendar all morning. Why does it matter? Because if he is using the Persian calendar, what happens to 457? What happens to the date 457 BC if Ezra 7:7 is written according to the Persian calendar? What's the answer? It's wrong. And Ellen White was wrong. And her tying her prophetic gift to that and tying Adventism to that was in big trouble. That's how immensely important this is. But if Ezra, who is a priest and a scribe, is writing according to the Judean calendar, then what? What year is this? 457 BC. Now the question comes, what would Jews like Ezra and Nehemiah have used as a calendar? But what would constitute the Jewish calendar? Judaism was underway. He was beginning Judaism. He was separating it from the Yahwist religions that we find in Elephantine, that we find in Samaria, and that we find in Ammon. The Samaritan religions, the old Yahwist religion, they won't stand for it. That's what's represented down there. They won't stand for it. What evidence can we draw on? Well, we can draw on the Elephantine papyri. The scribes writing the Elephantine letters double date between the Persian and the Egyptian calendar in such a way that they tell us beyond the shadow of a doubt what they're using. What are they using as a new year? The spring or the fall? What do you think? The fall. When they double date to the Persian calendar or they double date to the Tothic Egyptian calendar, they show us that they are using the old Judean calendar. And using an accession year method, what year is it according to our dates? What year is it? It's not 458, it is 457 BC. And when we read the Ezra Memoirs, as they begin here in Ezra 7 and run all the way to Nehemiah 8, 9, and 10, because it's Ezra writing in Nehemiah 8, 9, and 10. The end of, how do I know that? It says, I, Ezra. What did Ezra's reform culminate in? Anyone? What did Ezra's reform culminate in? What? Well, when did Ezra get back? What time of the year, according to his dating, did he travel from Babylon to Jerusalem? It was the summer. And when did he put his reform into effect? Anyone? Here's the whole key. We're looking for the beginning of the decree of Artaxerxes to fall when? In 457 BC in the fall. When in the fall? On the Day of Atonement in the fall. On the 10th day of the 7th month. And where do Ezra's memoirs end? What is it that Ezra is doing as his reform ends in Nehemiah 8, 9, and 10? He has just dismissed the people who have gone out on the 2nd day of the 7th month. He has read the law, and he is preparing them to observe what? The Day of Atonement and the Feast of Booths that follows it. He has read the law. He has told them the law is now going to go into effect, and he prepares them to do what? To keep the first Day of Atonement since the exile. So I'm asking you, Pete, what day did the decree to restore the temple in Jerusalem go into effect? What day? What is the first religious observance that they are going to do as a result of Ezra's reading the law? They are going to observe the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Weeks that follows it. So I'm going to ask again, what day did the decree go into effect? What day? Well, that's what we've been talking about. What day were Jews using? The Elephantine Papyri and the Samaria Papyri tell us what day were they using. They were using the fall calendar of the old Judean kingdom, and what day did Ezra's reforms go into effect? On the 10th day of the 7th month in what year? 457 BC. My point is that it could not have been known until the 20th century. It could not have been known until 1911 that what? That the old, hopeful, wishful thinking, I guess it must have been, as nearly as we can tell it seems to have been, probably was 457 BC, turned out to be what? It is what? It's not probably was, maybe, must have been, but what? It absolutely was. That's the key. Now, again, I'm going to say, the likelihood of an old 18th century calendar guess turning out to be exactly right to the day is what? So unlikely as to be miraculous and providential. That's the point. What did Paul say? We have not followed cunningly devised fables. Thank you.